Hello everyone. On today's Command Modern Operations tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at reconnaissance, specifically air reconnaissance, but we'll actually touch on a few different types of reconnaissance during this particular video. So what is reconnaissance? It's basically trying to find the other guy's stuff. So what I did is I put together a little bit of an outline of some useful information that we're going to need to know to kind of employ this stuff well. In general, the recon game in Command is simplified. So in the real world, of course, if you're using something that requires film development, you don't get the reconnaissance information directly. You'd have to actually analyze it later on. If you want to read some really, really interesting material on photo reconnaissance, look at how many photographs per day were collected during the Second World War that actually had to be analyzed by hand, which is just incredible. So that's going to make things a little different than it would be in the real world, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. So first of all recon in Command, like I just said, is real time. So if I use an SR-71 Blackbird and it takes pictures, you can't see my finger quotes, but they're there. It would give you the development for those pictures instantaneously, which is amazing because you can't do that in the real world. Obviously, we have digital cameras now. We have satellite uplinks. We have all sorts of amazing technology that gives us real-time visual reconnaissance. Also, things like tactical tomahawks come to mind. But unfortunately, or fortunately, there's just kind of a limitation. We get no communications intel inside of Command. I'm sure the people who do the professional military version of this spend 90% of their time doing comm intel and the other 10% doing actual combat. It's kind of a shame because if we had comm intel, we could identify where the enemy are getting orders from, and we could get responses back if the enemy wants to submit information to the person who sent it to it. Comm intel, if you are familiar with basically what it is you're basically doing direction finding on any enemy radio communication. It also gives you valuable intelligence. You know, if you listen on the radio and somebody says, we're launching 10 bombers at this target, well, surprise, surprise, I don't even need to turn my radar on to know probably where those bombers are coming from. So another thing I want to throw out too is in Command, you can't actually look through clouds unless you are dealing with something that provides electronics, such as synthetic aperture radar, which we'll look at in just a little while. But basically, the reason that's a big deal is if you actually take a look at my scenario, we're in Madagascar today, in case you couldn't tell, you'll notice that I have some light clouds between 20 and 23,000 feet. If I had satellite imaging, even though it's light clouds, quote unquote, it would severely limit my ability to see targets through those clouds, even though they're, quote, light. So kind of keep that in mind. It's almost like if there's any clouds, you're going to have difficulty seeing through them. So it's just kind of interesting how that works. Let's go ahead and close that. You'll need to see that. Scooting over these kind of things, we have a couple other big things that you got to be aware of. There's basically two kinds of reconnaissance that we simulate in Command. Obviously, there's a bunch more, but this is kind of how I like to look at it. There's the strategic, which is sort of the big picture reconnaissance. These are like your E3s and your E8s and your really, really, really large, long range kind of things. These would be your U2s, these would be your SR-71s, these would be your MiG-25 RBTs, things like that. These are big picture. Basically, you're going to put them in the air and you're going to leave them there for 8 hours, scanning massive swaths of land. These particular assets are usually really, really slow. You have to protect them, but they usually see further, which is important. Then you get what they call, what I like to call, I should say, is the tactical. These are basically, you take an F-16, you throw a camera on the side of it, and say, go see if you can find me the unit that happens to be at that location. So with that in mind, let's take a look at our scenario. So right now, we have our nice little country of Mozambique across the ocean from Madagascar. So what I've done a little bit differently here is I've created these little airports, and at these airports are pretty much every reconnaissance air asset that I could pretty much locate quickly and easily so that you could kind of see the different types of assets sort of in action. You know, I've got some R4s, I've got some, what's the Eurofighter doing here? Actually, this is a great, great reconnaissance asset. So to kind of give you guys an idea of how to sort of approach this. So what can we determine from a reconnaissance asset? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to skip ahead real quickly. First thing we can do is we can always identify where something is. So for example, if I fly over this way, we can identify where this airport is. This aircraft, or I should say airport, has automatically been identified by us thanks to the scenario editor. Now, if I was looking for what types of airplanes were visible at this airport, I could use a reconnaissance asset to do that. One thing that I will throw out really, really quickly is the fact that I'm not not going to be including underwater reconnaissance with this because we kind of covered that with ASW. So basically, what can we do? We can identify aircraft that are at other airports that are visible from the sky. Obviously, the airport is inside of a hangar. No amount of reconnaissance assets going to identify it. It's spectacular for finding enemy buildings or strategic targets. I've actually hidden a bunch of enemy buildings in here to see if we can try to find them today. One thing I will always say is it's hard to see something that's not moving that's small. So if you have like a little tank or a PT-76 or something, you're not going to see it unless it's moving or you're right on top of it, as you'll see a little later on. I'll talk about this in a minute. We'll talk about that in a minute. Enough of that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the different kinds we can use. So we have two different families of actual sensors. We have active, such as radar. That's like your ground mapping radar, which we've had since World War II. You have your MTI, your GMTI, which basically it's a Doppler filtered ground mapping radar. If it's moving, it becomes very visible. This stuff is spectacular, and it's actually pretty old school, but it works really well. You have what they call synthetic aperture radar, which is really clever. Basically, you hold the radar still, but you move the airplane. You can literally see through clouds. And we also have a variant of that I like to call, all right, what am I saying? I didn't invent it, called SLAR, which is side-looking airborne radar. That's simply synthetic aperture, but instead of pointing forward, we're pointing out the side. You'll see these on MiG-25s. Naturally, we have our active sonar, and of course, we have laser if we want to do distance measuring. Lasers inside of command are considered to be done kind of basically automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. As far as passive goes, we have visible light. Obviously, we can magnify visible light, which is convenient. We're obviously limited to daytime. We're limited to weather conditions. We're limited to, can we see through the clouds, etc. We have a bunch of different cameras. We'll look at these in a minute. We have our low light television, which is basically, night vision if you want to think about it. Generally, when you see LLTV and not IR, FLIR, that simply means you're dealing with the old-fashioned night vision. I'm sure you've seen pictures from the Gulf War of how wonderfully easy it is to see and identify things other than the things that are shooting shot at you. Resolution is usually not as good, but you can see at night. Infrared is great. There's some limitations with infrared, of course, naturally, in that it's more difficult to pick out certain kinds of details. But one of the great things about IR, as anybody who's played flight simulators, is it makes it really easy to spot warm targets in any sort of environment. Of course, if it's anywhere close to dusk or dawn, as a real-world pilot will tell you, you can't see a thing. But that's unfortunate. We don't simulate that, or maybe we do. I don't know. And then last but not least, of course, we have electronic support measures / electronic intelligence. Like I said, we have no comm intelligence. As far as platforms go, we'll start taking a look at these in just a minute. We'll save satellites kind of the end. Which brings me to this incredibly important part, how to read the capabilities of a reconnaissance unit. Before I do that, though, we want to take a look at what we're trying to identify. So what I'm going to do, like I normally do in a mission, is I'm going to go ahead and browse scenario platforms. I'm going to go hide from. I'm going to go and take a look at one of these objects. Let's see if I can find something. We'll take, yeah, why not? So if you open up a database entry and scroll all the way to the bottom, you're going to get signatures. If we're looking for a target using the naked eye or a camera, we're going to be interested in the visual detection range. In this particular case, I can see this target from 0.60 nautical miles away, from the front, the side, and the rear. Basically, you can do the integration here to figure out what it's going to be from the top. Likewise, I can classify it from a distance of, yikes, just shy of a quarter mile, which knowing how small this radar is, that doesn't surprise me. Notice my infrared detection range is awesome. You're probably sitting there going, well, that makes sense. It's a radar. It's hot. And I'd say, yeah, you're right. But notice the classification range isn't great, which also ties in with the visual. Now, if I'm looking for something by radar, like ground mapping radar or SLAR, I'm going to be dealing with a very small and very, very difficult to detect target. It doesn't mean that I can't detect it. It just means it's going to be difficult to detect. Now, of course, if I had something like, let's go get something fairly large here. Grab a hospital. Watch this. Now I can identify it from 3 nautical miles, and now I can classify it. Obviously, infrared, it's a little easier to see, but look at my radar emissions. This is spectacular. It's 1,000 square meters. We'll be able to pick this thing up from like 300 miles away, assuming we could deal with the curvature of the Earth. So keep that in mind for just a second. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go scoot over to the wonderful Blue Goon campaign wiki real fast. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to show you how you can use that information to figure out what you need. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab myself an SF-37 Viggen. Viggens are amazing reconnaissance aircraft. They're really, really cool. Scrolling down, you'll notice I have a bunch of these SKA 24C cameras. They're 120 millimeter lenses. I'd be like, talk about zooming in. And you can see I have several of these facing in different directions. We notice that they're frame cameras. That's simply a fancy term for you have to develop it conventionally. And we also possess this really, really nice SKA 24C. This is a 57. This is a wide angle lens, and it also has longer range. Now, what do I care about for a second? Well, check this out. I'm actually going to open this up real fast. When you open up a camera's data, you're going to be interested in several numbers. The first being its maximum range. If the target you're trying to detect exceeds this range, the quality of the camera does not matter. Now you're sitting there going, well, okay, what? Well, think about that for a second. Let me get my little terrible example here. If my aircraft is at about 25,000 feet, this 5 nautical miles can only be used straight down to see things that are directly below us. Because if I were looking out the side of the airplane, I'd be at 7.1. Again, I'm not going to do the trigonometry quickly. This is just me early in the morning trying to work this out. My targets out the side of the airplane would be 7.1 nautical miles away, which exceeds the maximum range of the camera. I know you're sitting there going, wait, I thought these cameras could see from 36,000 feet. If you're looking for a building, you can. But the fact of the matter is, if you're looking for a dude with his AK-47, you're not going to be seeing it from that altitude. So how do we solve this? Well, that's pretty straightforward. What you'd simply do is you'd fly at 2 nautical miles, which would mean your slant distance out the side would probably, let's see, square root of 2. What is that, 3.4 or something like that? I'm not going to make this up. Basically about that distance. So now I would be within my 5 nautical mile maximum range for things out the side. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to work this angle out. Your range now out the side could be all the way up to 5 nautical miles if your altitude were 0. So just kind of keep that in mind. This is going to be a big problem, as you'll see in a minute. All right, so scrolling down, we have a maximum range. Again, this includes vertical and horizontal range. If the slant is greater than 5, you can't see anything with this camera. I can't emphasize this enough because this will irritate you to no extent. Scrolling down, we have our scan interval. That's just how often we look out the window. This is once every 10 seconds. This doesn't bother us much. We're too slow for this to be a problem usually. Scrolling down to the bottom, we have detection zoom level. Sweet. This is awesome. You take this value and you multiply it by the target you're looking for. Sitting there going, what? Let me show you what I mean. So if I get myself a what the heck is a Tu-64? Let me get a T-64. Thank you. Take a look here. The detection range in a T-64 is 0.6. However, the multiplication visual detection level is 10. That would mean I could detect those tanks at a distance of 6 nautical miles, except my maximum range is still 5 nautical miles. So that would mean instead of picking up the T-64s at a distance of 0.6 nautical miles, I'd be detecting them instantaneously at 5 nautical miles. You'll also notice that my classification zoom is actually very high also. That simply would mean that I have the ability to classify that tank also at that distance of 5 nautical miles. So hopefully that makes sense. Scooting back real quick to our Recon. Again, really wild airplane here. I'm going to go take a look at my long-range frame camera real quickly. This is a great example of a long-range, very capable tool. So if you look here, wow, oh, that's neat. We're actually using, okay, that makes sense. So our maximum range now is 20 nautical miles. So I'm not going to go get my paint, but you could imagine 20 nautical miles. I could be 10 up and still see something like 33 miles this way. That's amazing. Of course, that doesn't do anything for me because my cloud level's here, but we're going to deal with that later. We scan interval doesn't change. Availability, don't worry about that. Notice, detection level is still 10. So remember that tank we couldn't see with that other camera? We can now see it no problem because it's visible at 6 nautical miles, but our maximum range is 20 nautical miles. So that means we're actually able to see that target instantaneously. Now, if you really want to see no kill like overkill, this is always fun to do. Let's go get ourselves a U2. You want to see a long-range camera? Look at this. Here we go. Very long-range reconnaissance camera. 80 nautical miles. But check this out. 20 times zoom. Wow, is this a reconnaissance asset? Not only can it multiply anything's signature by 20, but it has a maximum range of 80. So you want to talk about trying to find enemy ships? This thing is better than a radar, assuming the clouds don't block you. Okay, so that's cameras. Let's go ahead and take a look at everybody's favorite, the RQ-4 Rail Fist. You guys are probably familiar with this. This is a dedicated reconnaissance only. This isn't one of the MQs, so it's not a combat variation. You'll notice it has this thing called ISAR, and it also has a good old-fashioned forward-looking infrared. Let's go ahead and open up that real quickly. Just want to kind of give you a preview of what this looks like. Scrolling down here, you notice its detection zoom level is garbage. It's only times 2, so that tank is only visible at 1.2 nautical miles at night. However, look at its classification capability. If it sees it, it can classify it. So that's actually really effective. Let's go ahead and take a look at a classic Soviet Union asset as well, the Tupolev 16R. You can take a look here as we don't even have any form of camera on this thing. Instead, we've got this surface search radar, which we'll take a look at in just a second. So basically, if you can't see it, you can't do it. By the way, terrain type matters. In case you haven't actually seen the terrain of this particular area, let me flip this on real fast. And this will be a very dramatic picture for us in a second. If enemy units are hiding in things like cities or they're hiding in lush forests, they're going to have their detection range vastly reduced. This is going to be a very big problem for us, especially if you're trying to find something in here, for example. Stuff in these kind of areas, we can probably have an easier time seeing. Okay, not enough chat. Let's do this. So first thing I like to do in any reconnaissance situation is I like to use my ESM assets / electronic intelligence assets. Doing that's pretty straightforward. I got a bunch of different ones I can pick from. Generally, if I'm flying with the American side, almost everybody has some form of electronic intelligence. But when I think of it, I usually think of the rivet joint. Let's go ahead and get one of those. The Pilatus isn't too bad either, but that's not what I want. J-Stars is wonderfully useful as well. I also have an EP3. Let me borrow that one. And you know what? Why not? We'll grab this one too. That's a signals intelligence one too. So what these particular aircraft are going to do for me, is that the one? I don't want that one. What a signals intelligence aircraft is going to do is they're going to identify enemy radar emissions. So I'm going to go ahead and send each one. That's Argonaut 1, Gladiator 1. You guys get off there. Let's go ahead and get Klansman 1. That doesn't sound racist. And send them off there. So what these aircraft are going to do is they're going to climb up and they're going to start listening for electronic emissions from enemy targets. You can detect electronic emissions at about, oh, we got one already, at about 1.5 to 2 times the range of the actual thing emitting. So in this case, we've just identified a long track radar from a distance of, looks like about 184 nautical miles. I believe a long track radar has a range of about 200. Now you're sitting there going, but why do we pick it up at not 350? Well, it turns out that when you're looking at these, the electronic intelligence packages sometimes have a limited range. So be aware of that. Just because you can detect it doesn't mean you can see it. There's also the limitation of everybody's favorite, the curvature of the Earth for certain signals. Some ships, by the way, have spectacular ESM packages. Now, there's another thing I did here that you might have missed. You'll notice I put the 2 ESM assets basically at an angle to the target that I'm interested in. The reason I did this is because I can now triangulate its position by comparing the 2 different aircraft's view of the electronic asset in order to pinpoint it. This works amazing, so make sure you take advantage of it. I'm actually going to get my Klansman here, and I'm going to order him to, I'm going to go all the way around. Of course, when he runs out of fuel, what is he going to do? He's going to fly right over the target area, and I'm going to go, stop it. All right, I'll speed up time. Okay, we've definitely, saws, got one. So now we're going to apply a little bit of common sense. It looks like we got another P40, and I'm pretty confident it's not sitting in the ocean. But if I had another ESM asset up there, this would be a little easier. ESM assets, by the way, some of them have the ability to just identify there's a radar signal. Some can identify the specific type of object that's looking at them. If you're curious about that, when you actually open them up, you can actually scroll down, and it'll tell you specific emitter ID. Will let you know precisely who's looking at you. Otherwise, you'll get generic search radar 4 or something along those lines. Looks like we've identified another piece. For whatever reason, we're losing track of it. If that ever happens to you, you can just click on it and hit mark position. This is a great way to just remind you that that's where that was in case you run out of time and it disappears. I'm actually going to go and flip off the range settings here. All right, let's go ahead and let that happen. Yep, maybe it's over there. But again, we're doing a pretty good job here. Whoop, pause. What do we got? Looks like we picked up ship radar. That's a Palm Front. It's a Sovremene, which doesn't surprise me. It looks like we've also picked up a P-18, so that could be a surface-to-air missile radar. That could be a lot of different things. But keep in mind, I'm basically listening. Remember, you can only see the radars that are turned on. So I think at this point, we probably have enough electronic intelligence to make some decent assessments as to where the enemy's early warning stuff is, which is going to sound funny, but that actually tells us a lot more than you think because it lets us know where they're concerned to hide things. I'm actually going to move him along a little bit here. Just kind of move these guys out of the way. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at our area assets. So as far as area assets, the Americans have some amazing choices. They have the SR-71, which is incredible if you've not seen the actual stats on this thing. It's staggeringly good. Like if you just take a look at its cameras for a second here. Here we go. Look at this. 80 nautical miles range of camera. That's incredible. Not to mention this thing is also stupid fast. Now you're noticing I'm skipping stuff like this. So I'm going to go ahead and take, before I grab my photo assets, I'm actually going to grab a couple of my radar assets. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I want something that could possibly spot land moving targets first. And then I'll go ahead and get those U2s and everything else like that. Get in the air, please. There he is. Let's get my J stars. Or just regular. Yeah, no, this is a joint stars. That's right. So what this aircraft has is it has synthetic aperture radar on it. What that does is it basically can scan, it can see using a radar beam rather than needing a camera in order to do things. Also notice it's got amazing electronic capability. It was actually able to pick up a radar we missed last time. So of course you can't use that wonderful radar unless you turn it on. So let's go flip that sucker on. Now notice it spits out the sides because basically you're taking pictures by looking at one slice of sky at a time with each one of these radar beams. Now watch this. Anything that's moving will be detected. Also, anything that's still will be detected. Perfect. Stop. Check it out. So we immediately figured out where that Silverman is, but we also picked up these truck depots that we weren't aware of previously. We picked these up electronically using the radar as opposed to with a camera. We've also been able to pinpoint where that radar is, which makes me feel a little bit better. Go ahead again like this. And we've identified another radar we missed. This thing has an incredible system. Of course, it's a very modern aircraft. Doesn't surprise me. Oh, picked up another one. Wow. I guess we just needed to bring this out the first time. I don't know why we wasted so much time with those other elements. Let's go ahead and take a look. Take a look. Look at that. We've got it literally laser guided pinpointed. So this guy can not only see objects, but it can see moving objects extra well. Oh, there he is. And you go back home. Okay, so now we have a pretty good idea of where the enemy's stuff is. So now it's time to bring out the tactical reconnaissance assets. Now for tactical reconnaissance, I'm going to be pulling out, actually, before we do tactical reconnaissance, let's do a little bit more area reconnaissance. So as far as area reconnaissance, if you're doing something with a photo system, you're looking at using the American U2 or the American SR-71 if you're a little bit more classic. The Russians have a couple really, really neat photo assets, but they have nothing that's got the range of the American systems. So to do that, I'm actually going to back up to my airport, grab myself an SR-71, and I'm going to grab myself both of the different U2s, and I'll explain what these are capable of in just a second. All right, let's go ahead and get these out. Stop. Another Klansman. Interesting. So U2. So it's like I was saying, looking at the database, and look at the size of those wings. Looking at this real quickly, you'll notice it has a surface search radar on it. You'll also notice that it gives you speed information, heading information. Also, it possesses an extremely long-range camera, and as an added bonus, it can travel up to 85,000 feet. So I'm actually going to go sell him to go over here. Let's go ahead and grab his buddy. That's the SR-71. You know what that's for. And I'm going to go ahead and grab this and send him down here just so you can kind of get a feel. Look at the SR-71 go. That's amazing. Now, you're probably sitting here going, how come we haven't identified anything new? That's because there's clouds. You'll probably observe, first of all, look at the time of day. You can see right now it's about 1:30 in the afternoon. But we have clouds blocking the view of this incredibly capable of aircraft. If we had a higher altitude with less clouds, we could just shoot this over this entire continent and be done in a second. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cheat real quick and do something like that. Watch this. So now I can do something silly like this. Send him up to 85,000 feet. Crank him up and just let him go. Watch this. We've already identified something we didn't see yet. Notice my U2s are still on the way. Oh, picked up something new. Picked up, whoa, 4 more things. Okay, my U2, you're actually a synthetic aperture radar. I'm going to go ahead and make you fly around like this. Of course, I'm sure the people of Madagascar are getting a little nervous at this particular point. All right, let's let them go. Notice we've identified that visually, which means we have it fixed. But here comes the next best part. You'll notice that all these airports and things along those lines suddenly have this little icon in the corner that looks like a little arrow. That means that visually we've been able to identify aircraft that are located at that particular airport. If I actually click on contact report and hit spot hosted units, I can identify that there were 2 small attack planes there. As a matter of fact, if I get my SR-71 just a little bit closer, I'm actually going to let it fly over directly. Stop. Look at what else we've identified. We're at 90,000 feet and we've photo identified all of these armored vehicles. We've also been able to get a pretty good look of this particular unit. We've identified them as high-end helicopters. We've also picked up some vehicles and things that we didn't even know were there previously because of his camera. Likewise, keep in mind our little handy-dandy U2 here is helping us out. Looks like we've even identified buildings that weren't visible at the beginning. Again, because we have that visual range like I did in my little doodle in paint. Again, if we had bad clouds, we can always use the radar units, but it's going to be difficult to see anything that is not, as you can see this guy flying over right here. Nice. Look at that. We even able to pick some ships. We even identified that this ship over here seems to be having some distress because it's been damaged. Again, that's because of the photo capabilities. So now that we've had a pretty good idea of where all the enemy stuff is, it's time to bring out the tactical reconnaissance aircraft. I'm actually going to grab him and send everybody go home. So tactical reconnaissance, I like to think of as point reconnaissance. Now, the problem with tactical reconnaissance aircraft is it pretty much doesn't matter what country you are. They're all going to have the same basic limitation, and that's that 5-mile range. If we're not using a radar, unfortunately, we got to get really close and really, really low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back the bad weather we had a minute ago. Again, that wasn't bad weather. That was average weather. That looks good to me. And now I'm going to go ahead and grab one of my tactical reconnaissance efforts here. This, by the way, is really cool if you've never seen this. This looks good. Let's use him. He's got a little recon pod. Go ahead and pause. There he goes. Okay, so how do we use this element? So what I want to do is I want to get a better idea of the kind of aircraft that are located here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fly him over. Keep in mind, Su-17 is not going to have a lot of range, so that's going to always be a limitation. And when he gets close to the target area, 36,000 feet, by the way, is about 6 nautical miles up, which means he wouldn't be able to see anything with his camera. So what we're going to have to do is tell him to actually dive. One really cool way you can do this is you can actually edit the waypoints manually and do something like this. This also gets us underneath that cloud layer, by the way. And then we could, of course, come over here. We could set the waypoint height on this one back up to high altitude. And, of course, when you do this, you want to go fast. All right, let's watch what happens. So he's going to fly all the way down to 12,000 feet, which he did, and he immediately identified several aircraft. Now, I usually tell him to go up to full speed here. You don't want to waste any time in the target zone, because remember, there's no limitation to how many things you can take a picture of. Well, there is, but it's minor based on how fast you're going. So he's going to dump himself all the way down to 2,000 feet. So now his slant distance is significant out the side. He's going to fly over the target area. Because I set his waypoint to go back up, he'll finish crossing the target area, then he'll climb back up again. So let's see what kind of intelligence we've collected. We've identified a Cessna 208 and a Cessna 500. So nice job, nice job, nice job. Now this applies to anybody who's got that basically 5 nautical mile camera. I'm actually going to send him home. You did a great job. Thank you for your help. So for example, if I go over the UK, France, and Sweden, if I get myself an RF4, you'll notice it has the exact same basic camera limitation as these little 5 nautical miles. He does have side-looking airborne radar, which again, it's decent at seeing things that are moving. It's not going to identify, and ships, by the way. It's not going to have a great time of seeing something that's still. Now, one of the things I identified, I'm actually going to launch this guy right away. One of the things we identified a minute ago was a bunch of some kind of infantry units down here. This was actually 48 minutes ago. By the way, if a contact goes greater than an hour, it's going to automatically basically be dropped. So you might need to mark them. So I want to identify whose units these are. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a mission to do the same activity. The basic way to do reconnaissance missions is with support missions. There's two kind of ways that I like to do it. There's the easy way where you basically set up kind of an area instead of just a patrol. And then there's kind of like the fancy tactical way where you can actually mark out individual waypoints of the path you want him to follow like we did a minute ago. So to do that, which is my intention, I'm going to go ahead and say this is the start of his patrol zone. This is going to be the midpoint, obviously, where all these unusual enemies are. This is going to be the end point. Of course, I'd like him to get safely out of there. So now if I go like this and create tactical recon, I can now say support, press OK. Yeah, whatever. It's not a polygon anyway. Chill. Set this to single loop. Now that I've done that, oh, I got to remove this. I don't need that. Now that I've done that, it's going to follow this path like this when it arrives on station. And you can also, of course, say that it's a one-time only mission, so it automatically ends after it's completed. Now, here's the cool thing. We can tell him to transit at cruise and go to afterburner when he arrives. We can also set his station altitude low enough for him to actually identify those units on the ground. Remember, tanks and trucks and stuff can only really be seen well from about 2 or 3 miles. So that means when he arrives, he'll be at high altitude. He'll dive down to low altitude at this point, do his reconnaissance, and then take back off and then fly back home. So let's go ahead and get that fancy dancy flight real quickly. Believe he was down here somewhere. We can, of course, if we don't find him right ago, I am not too concerned. Actually, what am I doing? Let's do this the easy way. Just gotta hit F6. Sign a mission. Take care of that, will you? And watch. And he's off. By the way, if you have an aircraft with a radar that you want to be using when they get to that zone, what you can do is you can click this button right here to tell it to do that. As a matter of fact, don't forget to come in here and set this also when you do that. So otherwise, his radar will not get turned on when he gets into the reconnaissance. So watch this. He's going to come to this point, dive down super duper low. Once he gets here, I believe. Where are you? There he is. Pause. Notice, he's entered the reconnaissance area. He's diving down to 2,000 feet. He's also flipped on his side-looking airborne radar, which again, that's going to help identify large or moving targets. Technically, it can identify other targets, but I think it's going to have a really tough time to do so. All right, let's see if we can get a good look at these targets. All right, he's diving down. He's about 2,000 feet above sea level now. He's just skipping along. Remember, if I put him at, say, 15,000 feet, he wouldn't be under the clouds, A, and B, we wouldn't be able to actually see much because we'd be up too high for the camera to work properly. Here he goes. And he's decided to climb back up for some reason. What do you think you're doing? Get back down there. But notice, he's traveling the exact path that we asked him to. He zips over the target area, full speed, identifies half of them, and then he gets out of there as fast as he can. I'll flip it back to auto. So notice we've actually been able to identify a bunch of tanks. We've identified, looks like some AAA. Oh, actually, that's artillery. I take it back. And he is on his way, and as soon as he hits this last point, he's going to automatically go return to base mode. Have fun. Nicely done. That was good. That was good. He did a nice job. So that's one of the cool ways to do this. So now that you've seen kind of how to use all the assets, you have a pretty good understanding of all the different pieces that you could do. What do we do next? Well, now it's time to get some satellites. Now, I've been saving satellites for the end because everybody loves satellites because they're so amazing unless there's a cloud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open my scenario back up again. And before I do that, I just want to point out a couple quick things about satellites. I think we hit that. Yep. Okay, satellites. Here we go. So there's a wide variety of different satellites of different quality, different types, different sensing. Basically, an image intelligence satellite is like the old Coriolis ones. Basically, they can look through, if you have no clouds, they can see things on the ground. In the really old days, they actually had film. They'd take a bunch of pictures and you'd eject the film out the side of the actual satellite to re-enter. It was pretty cool. We have the mass-int satellites, which are kind of the omni satellites. They have a little bit of everything a lot of time. I call this a CSI satellite because it does everything. Enhance. We have the NOS/EOR intelligence satellites. These are the I'm looking for enemy ships based on their emissions satellites. Both the U.S., pretty much every country has some variation of this. Obviously Russia, obviously the United States are kind of, this is their specialty. And then we have signals intelligence satellites, which we're going to take a look at. So how do we get satellites? Well, usually the mission editor would provide you with satellites in. If they don't, if you're in editor mode, you can go up to unit actions and click on add satellites. Now, like I was just saying again, hey, there's our categories. Hey, there's our categories. Again, this is an older style satellite, takes pictures. This is a very modern, basically, again, mass signals intelligence. It's going to be looking at different types of emissions. We have the naval, basically, observation satellites, and of course, we have the signals intelligence satellites. I don't think we have any image satellites left. No, not in 2001. We're kind of done with that. But we do have mass ints. Obviously, we have the early warning satellites. This would basically detect ballistic missiles, things like that. We have the keyhole blocks. These are all amazing, amazing satellites that can do just about anything as far as detection goes. We'll go ahead and grab a couple of those. We'll add those. Let's see. We have the new ones. We'll go ahead and grab one of those. USA 161. Yeah. We have the kind of semi-modern ones. We'll go ahead and launch these guys too. Notice it tells you if it's in orbit based on your current year. We'll grab our Misties. We'll grab, oh, we don't get those yet. Don't get those yet. Don't get those yet. So that's going to get us in trouble. Of course, you have your signals intelligence satellites as well. You have kind of the old ones. Let's see, we don't even have that as technology. We'll grab these. And we'll grab those, why not? Keep in mind, the more satellites you add, the slower your simulation is going to go. So I added a bunch of satellites. Where are they? Zoom out. Ta-da! And there are my satellites, kind of all chilling around the Earth. If I fast forward to time, they go bzzz, just like that. Now, one of the things I really kind of respect these guys for is if you go over to 3D view when you've selected a satellite, let's hope TAC view is behaving today. Sometimes it gets a little funky sometimes. I understand in the most recent update, they've had a little bit of fun with this also. Watch this. If I click on a satellite, and I go ahead and select that for a second, boop, it's actually in the sky. Look at how high up it is. That's so cool. Anyway, moving on. So the first thing we need to remember with satellites is you can't really see well through clouds. So with that in mind, I'm going to say the weather got better, and I'm going to go ahead and clear the clouds out. Second thing with satellites is they have to get close to see. They are subject to the same limitation as this. However, as an added bonus, because we're satellites, look at the range we get. That's awesome. The third thing is you have to make sure the satellite's got to get close enough. So the way you can check that, believe it or not, is you can click on something, go up to view, I should say game, and there's this thing that says satellite pass predictions. If you open that up, you can click on the map and it will tell you when the next satellite will actually pass by. So in this case, in 55 minutes, our next, by the way, this is a very expensive calculation, we can see that USA 116 will be flying over in about an hour. So let's go ahead and fast forward about an hour. Whoa, stop. So you're going, whoa, what's all this? These are signals being detected in this area by this satellite here. Look at the range on that thing. That is excessive. Anyway, we'll go ahead and fast forward time a little bit. Oh, there goes another one. Anybody know why that's sitting there? Geosynchronous. Just kind of hang out here for a bit. So how you guys doing today? Pretty good? Pretty good? All right, where's USA 116? Should be here any second now. USA 116, I'm still waiting. There goes another one. There's another geosynchronous site. Stop. Okay, let's double check my weather as well real quick to make sure I didn't accidentally forget to change that. Pretty confident that he would have gotten close enough to gotten a decent picture there. Let me go ahead and pick this one real quickly. 45 minutes. Where's USA 116? I'm actually going to stop. There's USA 53. Which one is this is a mass in. This has got a camera. Yes, nice. So what this is going to do, or actually what it did already, is it actually was able to identify at each one of these airports the fact there are different units there. If I open up my contact report, I can see there's a 777 here. If I click right here, I can spot the fact that there is some full freedom fighters. They're not supposed to have those. As he zips by, we also identified aircraft from space. We also were able to identify this ship from space. Let him finish going by, and then we're good. So the satellite basically did everything we did with all those aircraft, but it can't get shot down simply. So now last, what do we do with this information? Well, that was kind of the big idea, wasn't it? Well, let's say I wanted to order up a strike against this airport. Now that I know that there's enemy aircraft there, I could do something nice and sneaky. Like I can get myself an SSGN here. Let's be fairly polite about this. And now I can order an attack on this site, but watch this. It tells you right in the screen where there are aircraft located at specific points of the airport. Of course, it tells you how long that information is old. So now what I can do is I can actually select this specifically. Let's see here. Let's order two up for each. So now we're going to launch 2 Tomahawks at the specific location on the ground where the target is. Let's go ahead and let that go. Of course, we just declared war on Madagascar. Of course, what is Mozambique doing with an Ohio submarine? Well, we're going to ignore that. And watch this. Pause. So now, of course, what we could do is get something smart. We could get ourselves this. Meanwhile, as we launch those, we should have been smart and launched ourselves like a Reaper or something that would be in the target area. So as soon as that hit took place, we could actually fly over the target zone and identify if we actually did enough damage to it. Let's go ahead and take a look in a second. Oh, we've identified something over here. I wonder what that is. Contact report. Oh, there's still 6 unknown units. What happened? Oh no, what happened? I guess we didn't do enough damage. Losses and expenditures. Oh, no, we did it. We did a nice job. Nice. So as you can see, we still were able to absolutely blow them up, meaning that we're not wasting our expensive precision-guided munitions. All right, let's go ahead and take a look to see if I didn't miss anything. Platform submarines, modern ones, can do ESM and visual. There are electronic intelligence bunkers, the satellites, I think we covered that. Oh, by the way, land cover matters. If you're looking for something in the desert, it's easy. If you're looking for something in the jungle, it's hard. Let's see here. ESM, clouds, defeat recon, speed. Don't forget what time of day it is. Yeah, I think we did a good job. All right, hopefully this is informative. This is basically in response to somebody's question about reconnaissance assets. Actually, one more thing I'll do before I leave. One of my favorite reconnaissance assets that's a relatively recent aircraft is the Eurofighter 2000 because it has such an incredibly good radar on the nose of it. Check this out. I'm actually going to crank the clouds up to something excessive real fast, just so you can see just how effective the radar is on this thing. Go ahead and speed up time real quick. Pause. Let's go ahead and grab it. Of course, limited range, always a problem. Flip his radar on. There we go. Watch this. Keep in mind, terrible weather. We identified the ship, and look at this. We instantaneously identified those two truck depots. Let's get a little closer. Oh, we ran out of gas. I guess that's a limitation. All right, hopefully you found this informative. If you have any questions, toss them in the comments. Otherwise, just remember, pick a reconnaissance asset that actually has line of sight on the thing you're looking for. Don't worry about speed. Consider range. Radar is good if you're looking for something big or something that's moving. And I'm just trying to think, always use your ESM before you use your cameras. And obviously, if you're going to use something with a big camera like an SR-71 or U2, you've got to be able to see the thing you're looking for. Enjoy.